then there are the other side of the spectrum of people who say that when you water fast, you damage your metabolism, you're becoming a fat store.
While, yeah, you can have a little bit of a slowed down metabolism to some extent, it's vastly overstated and not something that's like you're going to need to fear. I mean, if somebody is, habitually under eating for long periods of time and then binging, I mean, that has its own negative consequences on the body and can have impacts. But we're not talking about like, oh my God, now I'm ruined and, it's going to take years to fix this and stuff like that, right? It's a lot harder on the digestive system. It's harder on the hormones, and all of those things require a little bit of time to reset.
So would you then, to summarize it in a way, say that the metabolic rate is pretty much set, but can be a little bit slightly impacted?
Yes.
By certain...
Yes, absolutely. Oh gosh, controversy, no. Hello.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I just had a few bites of dinner, but I was late in making it, so I'm going to have dinner a little bit later. But it was so good.
Nice.
Oh my gosh, it was from the bundle.
What did you make?
I made 3 dishes from Raw Chef Yin's new Korean barbecue course, and it was spectacular, I'll be honest. I haven't had these kind of flavors before. I think I've had Korean maybe a little bit like way back, but it's been so dang long, and it was really tasty. Basically kind of like Korean barbecue lettuce burritos. Ridiculous.
Wow, I love wrapping things like food into lettuce.
Oh.
It's so good. These days I'm doing it almost every day.
Yeah, me too. I'm basically like, if I make a curry or a chili or even a salad or so many things, I'll wrap it in lettuce or sometimes nori. And, sometimes I'll use a celery stick or a bok choy stick and eat it. And it's just an extra great way to get in more minerals and more greens. And it's more fun too, right?
Yeah. And that crunchiness, it always goes so well with whatever you put in. So yeah, I agree. It's a great way to get in more greens for sure.
Mm-hmm. And if I have some greens in my teeth, I apologize. I'll try and pick them out discreetly, like over here, I still feel some.
Well, I haven't seen anything, so
okay.
You're good.
Good.
So today's topic, super controversial, but I think super juicy. So the difference between eating abundantly, eating unlimited, fasting, water fasting, juice fasting, there's so much controversy, I feel, especially in the raw vegan and high raw vegan movement. There's so much conflicting information, so much contradicting information as well. So I was wondering, maybe to first get into it, how has your experience been? Have you ever been at a point where you felt super confused and you didn't know what to believe anymore and what was right and what was wrong? And how did you find your edge, your balance, and your own truth? How did that go along?
Well, that's a big one right off the bat. Boom, Where do I go from here? Well, definitely there were times where I felt a little bit confused, more so before I started the raw diet. And then for a little bit of a period of time while I was on the raw diet, definitely before. So just, not even understanding that this isn't just a pleasure tube and that I could just shove anything down in any combination. I thought it was kind of crazy that there was actually a way to eat that brought better levels of health, right? But I think I was pretty darn lucky when I met Dr. Doug Graham. He really simplified things for me, and from there was a lot of clarity. But just before that, I was high raw. I was trying to figure out how to go all raw. And the first real books I read on an all raw diet, 'cause before that I read a bunch of other stuff, Fit for Life and other stuff that pointed towards it. But I didn't get how to really do an all raw diet. And I remember reading 2 books from David Wolfe, actually. Sun Food Diet Success System, which kind of recommended like a triangle, like it recommended like fats, carbohydrates, protein. And there was a lot of great info in there, but I didn't really understand, like it didn't say ratios. It just said kind of like, oh, like just eat those and like eat like kind of equal amounts. And I kind of tried it. It never really felt good in my system. I never really was able to maintain it. And so I was kind of bouncing around high raw, trying to do all raw. And his other book heavily plagiarized actually word for word plagiarized, actually, and I don't mean to, we're talking about controversial subjects. I'm just going to say it as it is. Every single chapter ended with cooked food is poison. So that was kind of like, oh my gosh, really? Okay, I should be getting towards all raw. And then that's when I kind of found the Sun Food Diet Success System, but I still didn't know how to apply it in a way that felt good, that I felt totally satisfied, that my athletics were feeling good. And I just continually went back to some cooked carbohydrates for dinner, namely sweet potatoes and rice, and sometimes some other kind of, vegan cooked stuff, right? But when I met Dr. Graham, he super, super simplified it. Like he basically just said, like, when you're hungry, eat fruit, eat all you care for, no restriction, all you enjoy, And if you don't feel like fruit, eat greens, all you care for, all you enjoy. And sure, have some fat, but keep it lower. And I was like, okay, no, that's 20 years ago, and I haven't looked back since then. It made it a heck of a lot easier. So that was the biggest kind of confusion in the beginning. And I'll say one other time about maybe 5 or 6 years in, I heard about people falling off the raw vegan lifestyle, and I started to have some concerns, like different little things starting to pop up, not for me, but I just saw out in the ether right out there. And so I started to really try and research that and connect with other longer term raw foodists and talk to them about those different scenarios and try and simplify it. And really truthfully, I guess that was about year 7. Once I let go of those fears and started to really understand why those realities can come into being, I had even more clarity, even more confidence, and my health and wellness kind of popped up another notch.
Wow, so cool. Thank you for sharing. So you mentioned how Douglas Graham always said that you can just like eat as much fruit as you want. What are your thoughts? Do you think it is possible to overeat on fruit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's possible to overdo anything. If you drink too much water, you can be poisoned by it, get water poisoning, and you can it can be fatal actually, right? But fruit, it's hard to overdo, and we can definitely get much more into that. But you can essentially, if you're forcing it without enjoying it, if you're just mindlessly shoving it back. And I've actually been there, like some people, I've heard people say you can't gain weight on fruit, it's impossible. I know it's 100% possible. We've talked, I know you do too, and I know other people who really know, and they've done like really tried to pin it down and be meticulous in measuring and weighing out themselves and their fruit portions and stuff like that. But I had a time where I was injured. I was really athletic, and this kind of, I'll go back just a second. Doug was also saying like, man, you're athletic, you're trying to be like professional, and you're really active. Like the upper limit is like really high up there. Just eat all you freaking care for. Like don't be worried about eating too much. Just make sure you're enjoying it. And so when I was injured, though, I was used to eating a certain amount, let's just say for a ballpark, 3,000 calories, and I was really active. And then I was hurt, I was depressed, and I was still eating the exact same amounts, just not thinking about it. I was already in that cycle. I'd been doing it for multiple years. And so I'd make a banana smoothie that was my 2 liter banana smoothie. And even though I wasn't active and I probably only needed like 2,300 calories a day because I wasn't getting out there skateboarding and doing other stuff, I still maintained that. I still ate 3,000 calories, and I'd get about 60%, 70% through the smoothie, and I'd look at it and I'd be kind of grossed out by it, but I'd be like, I don't want to waste this. So I just kind of set it aside and I'd continue drinking it. And over the period of about a month and a half, 2 months, where I was injured and not really skating, I gained weight. I got my abs started to cover up. I started to get a little bit of a bubble under here, and I definitely gained weight. And again, I know other people like he's not really in the scene so much anymore, but Andrew Perlot or Perlot, he used to do really meticulous kind of experiments, and he did that once too, where he really tracked it, and over a period of time, he gained weight, he gained fat just on fruit. He wasn't eating excess fat, he wasn't eating other stuff, just eating excess fruit, and that's really my experience too. And I've seen it out in the community from people who have tried to basically go with that, like eat unlimited, you can't overdo it. So I think that kind of goes into other aspects of this question, though.
Yeah, but I think it's so interesting what you say. So what are your thoughts then on like calories and calories in, calories out? What like is your whole take on this?
Well, I mean, the calories in, calories out is the best model we have. It's not perfect, and there are different things that are going to be implicated in how we absorb the calories from our food, ranging from how ripe it is to how well we chew, to our emotional state while we're eating, like all those things can actually affect how much we get from the food we're eating. But it again is the best we got. And I mean, even beyond that, like, you might go on Chronometer and go, oh, well, 1 pound of bananas is 400 calories, and you think, okay, well, that's right. But are the bananas, like really good quality and extra sweet, and they actually might be an extra 30, 40, 50 calories, or are they crappy quality and not very sweet? Are they smaller bananas? Like, it's not like McDonald's, every single piece of fruit is very different and can be different. So there has to be some of that variability. And that's why the intellectual kind of approach of just like looking at it and being like a mathematician and relying on figures being exact, it doesn't really work. And instead, coming back into our body and into some intuition and enjoyment and listening to our fine-tuned instrument really comes into play.
Mm. So if there was someone who would want to not just maintain their weight but lose weight, would you recommend them to count and restrict their calories and make sure they're in a deficit? Or what would your approach be? What would you recommend someone?
I mean, I would really, I mean, it's going to depend to some degree upon the situation and the individual. You want to fine tune and tailor to their goals, their kind of personality and stuff like that, right? And where they're starting from and where they're trying to go. And if they have a specific reason to try and get somewhere for a certain reason, whether it's like athletics or a competition or at the beach, like all those kinds of things, right? But in general, I would definitely recommend just being very loving and patient with self and knowing that going in a direction, not necessarily trying to get there as fast as humanly possible, is going to be more loving and more supportive of the emotional, physical self so that they can get there with more grace and ease. So I wouldn't recommend restricting because generally speaking, if we're restricting, then we're feeling like we're missing out and not getting enough. And we're much more prone to yo-yoing and binging and purging. And that's a lot harder on the body. So, I mean, being even more mindful and eating till full satiation. Maybe if they're looking to lose a little bit faster, replace a little bit of fruit with even more greens and veggies so that they're even more satiated and getting more nutrient density so they don't feel like they're restricting, but they are getting a little less calories than they would at a maintenance. But even still, just that following kind of satiation, following mindful eating and eating the fruits and veg that they really enjoy without feeling like they're missing out and going to bed hungry, to me is going to be a much more sane, streamlined, and compassionate way to do it.
That's so beautiful. And I love your approach so much. And I'm so grateful that you're out there spreading it. And you mentioned something like a really big key here, and that is presence and being very calm when you're eating. And I've definitely also made the experience that when I have stressful periods in my life and I'm like eating very quick and it's so easy to overeat, whereas when I'm very calm and present around the food and I really enjoy it, I really take the time to sit down. I don't watch Netflix while I'm eating, at least most times. That's when I feel like my digestion is the best, my belly is the flattest, like I just feel so good and I'm the leanest. So if someone were to ask like for one or two advice, what would you say is something that really helps you to, I know we already had a whole conversation on this, but maybe to summarize for everyone who's watching, what are some ways to bring more presence into eating?
That's a good question. And I do want to first also just say, like, I'm not coming here from a place that like I'm a perfect raw food yogi that eats with full presence every moment. I still do watch Netflix sometimes when I'm sad or depressed, which I still do get, human being here. I sometimes eat emotionally and overeat, but I found over the long term, just applying those steps of presence and of genuine enjoyment helps me to maintain. And I don't worry about little fluctuations. I just accept what I choose and then move on from it rather than beating myself up about it, which has been a huge game changer for me. So, I mean, some steps to come back into presence, I think, is really just to feel what you're feeling, and accept it. So if you're feeling something intense, well, feel that instead of trying to do something else while you're feeling something, right? So whether that means just sitting there and closing your eyes and feeling and not even necessarily trying to totally identify and say, this is exactly what it is, and this is why it is, and this is how I can fix it. Instead, just breathing and noticing, okay, I'm feeling something. What is that? Where is it in my body? Can I breathe into it? Can I relax in that place? Because the conscious breath has the ability to melt any stagnant energy, right? Especially if we're just trying to calm down and feel it out and actually consciously breathe into that part of the body. I've learned that through yoga, and it's an incredibly powerful practice, whether we're talking about emotional energy or physical pain in our body, just bringing that breath to it. So I think that's a big one. Um, Otherwise, yeah, just kind of slowing down and maybe having a glass of water, taking a walk, connecting with nature, whether that's outside barefoot on bare earth or whether that's just taking a walk in nature and looking at the trees and, having a bit of a soft gaze, which comes into another aspect, actually. If we're really focused and we're looking at something, we're much more likely to be thinking specifically and kind of judging or making a big thing in our mind. Whereas when we have a bit more of a soft kind of yogic gaze where we look a little crazy and we're not really looking at anything, it really calms the mind. And being in nature with a soft gaze and just breathing, that helps you to come into presence too. So otherwise, I mean, I also even say like just making food. You can bring this presence, this mindfulness, this meditative quality to anything you do. So when we're feeling intense, it's like, okay, well, what can I do that is productive right now, that is bringing me towards my goals? So whether that's making food that is going to be really nourishing and compassionate for yourself, or whether that's doing some exercise, like yoga or walking, running, whatever, just doing it with presence, all of that is going to calm down the body and the mind and get you much more relaxed. You're ready to eat. And I mean, the exercise may not calm the body, but it's going to prepare the body and it'll get you a little bit out of your head and get that energy out a little bit more.
Yeah, that is so true. And I've also found that when I move my body first before I eat, then I'm much more calm when I actually eat. So I love that advice.
Huge. That was one huge thing that Dr. Graham really taught me too, was to earn your meals, especially your big fruit meals, like your lunch meal, which is for me and generally speaking for a lot of raw foodists is the biggest caloric hit of the day when your digestion is the strongest. And I like to have a giant sweet fruit meal. It may have greens, it may not. But if we want our body to be able to absorb that as easily, efficiently, and smoothly as possible, it's really advantageous to have some water, make sure you're really well hydrated, and get some movement because you then utilize the muscle glycogen or the glycogen in the muscles, and that creates a demand for new glycogen or new sugars to come in and then turn into glycogen in the muscles. So earning your meals, getting some activity, even if it's 5 minutes, like starting with 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. You're like, okay, I'm gonna have lunch. Well, let's move my body again. Let's just get something pumping, and that does really set us up for even better digestion, assimilation, absorption.
So cool. Thank you for sharing. And I have another controversial question. So within the movement, there's also this hype about juice fasting and water fasting, or shall I say juice feasting. And also this idea that when we eat less or the less we eat, the cleaner we become. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that is a really big one. And I mean, obviously, if we reduce our digestive expenditure and we're still getting in the nourishment we require, we're going to be more prone to be releasing excess. We're going to be more likely to kind of become cleaner, but I don't really like to look at it in that way of like trying to reach purity because we're always going to be detoxifying. We always have metabolic waste. We're always taking in toxins from the environment. So we're never going to be pure, right? We're never going to be completely clean. We're always detoxifying. So I think it really comes down to the mindset that we're coming from. Like if we're coming from a place that I'm not enough, I'm not clean enough. Like once I do this, I'll be perfect. Or the big myth, like I got to clear out this dragon and get rid of this mucoid plaque and fast a million times or juice fast a million times. Well, then again, we're missing the point. And one, that the mucoid plaque is a myth. It's not really actually real, and we don't have to cleanse or fast or detox ourselves from it. But if instead we're coming from a place of, hey, I've been doing this for a year or two, I still have some nagging issues or I have a chronic ailment that the regular lifestyle isn't necessarily responding completely to, or I just want to, fine tune a little bit, or maybe I want to take a bit of a digestive break, and really increase my digestive strength, then yeah, sure. Then maybe a shorter term, midterm juice feast or a fast under supervision can be incredibly powerful and helpful. But for me, it's not one of those like blanket, everyone should do it. And unless you do it, you're never going to succeed or, reach greatness, whatever it might be. Right. So Does that answer your question, or do you want to go any deeper into that?
No, I think that's great. And then there are the other side of the spectrum of people who say that when you water fast, you damage your metabolism and you like no longer you're becoming a fat store. Like many people are afraid, oh my God, I'm gonna become a fat store
Yeah.
when I do these things. So that's kind of the other side of the spectrum. And yeah, I was also wondering what are your thoughts on that?
Well,
And
I'll be straight up and say I'm not an absolute fasting metabolic, pretend, what's it called, expert. But I have talked to a lot of people who are and who have really gone into this, and they say that while, yeah, you can have a little bit of a slowed down metabolism to some extent, it's vastly, vastly overstated and not something that's like you're gonna need to fear. And beyond that, if you are doing something like a fast, it's important to do so under the tutelage of someone who really knows what they're doing. So they fast you the appropriate amount. You don't just sit at home and try and do 40 days because that's what Jesus did, in the desert, right? So instead, taking a little bit more of a mindful approach and educated approach. But that's not something that I've seen as being like a big reality for the most part. The other thing though is somebody definitely can fast and go so long that their digestion is not as good when they're done. Like fasting for a prescribed amount of time that is really right for the individual can actually help out with digestion, especially if they're coming from a place of poor digestion or damage in their digestive tract, autoimmune issues and stuff like that. But if it's overdone, it can impact the flora, the microbiome, and make it a little bit harder to come back from. But that all said, like coming back from fasting or from a juice feast is important to do so in a way that you actually are supporting your digestive tract and not just overburdening it. So slowly reintroducing certain foods and starting with the easier to digest and being even more mindful and all the stuff we've basically been talking about is really important.
yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think it's so important to not be so obsessed about this, like, oh my God, I'm damaging my metabolism if I don't eat enough. Because what I've found from my experience is when I do that, then I'm also looking at food in a way of it's never enough. Like, oh my God, have I already had enough carbohydrates? Have I already had enough food? And that kind of mentality for me has also not really brought joy to my way of eating and to my life
Yeah.
because like then I wasn't actually appreciating the food that I was eating because it was always this mentality of like, is it already enough? So
Yeah.
yeah.
One thing I will add to that. I mean, if somebody is, habitually under eating for long periods of time and then binging, I mean, that has its own negative consequences on the body and can have impacts. But we're not talking about like, oh my God, now I'm ruined and, it's going to take years to fix this and stuff like that, right? It's a lot harder on the digestive system. It's harder on the hormones, and all of those things require a little bit of time to reset. We have I don't remember what is it, the law of dual effect. I can't remember what the name of it is, but as hormones shift, they can go one way, and then it doesn't just go boop, right back to normal. It can go this way and then this way, and then come back to center. And as those hormonal shifts are going, then yeah, we can hang on to or hold weight a little bit more than we would if we were in balance more often. But again, this isn't a long-standing thing that is going to take years and years and years to recorrect. Utilizing kind of what we're talking about, just coming back into balance and being patient and loving of self, and eating without feeling like restricting is going to help to make that more streamlined instead of experiencing those yo-yos that keep us out of balance.
That makes so much sense. So would you then, to summarize it in a way, say that the metabolic rate is pretty much set, but can be a little bit slightly impacted
Yes.
by certain?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've had in-depth conversations with Dr. Graham on that because, a lot of people say basically that no, like you can just like someone can be like their metabolic rate can be vastly different. And that's really not true. It is very small differences. And I think it's a misconception, which we can kind of go into a little more. It's like if someone is really well muscled or if someone has very little muscle, well, muscle tissue burns more than fat tissue. So they're going to have a little bit of a different reality around, the calories that they can consume to maintain their weight, right? So for example, just to clear that up, like myself at 185 pounds with a very low body fat percentage and a high muscle percentage relatively, for my weight, I can burn through more calories than someone who's my exact weight but has very little muscle and lots of fat. And they might think like, how can you eat so much? I eat everything, and if I eat anything, I gain weight. And it's, well, the fat tissue is burning very, very few calories compared to my muscle tissue, which burns much, much more. So there are little things like that I think make a bigger difference than people recognize. And it's not that we're talking like 500, 600, 800 calories, but enough that it seems like a big difference, especially when people, don't really know what's going on there.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that strength training is a very important part when it comes to weight loss and building muscle? So you're like increasing your metabolic rate, or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's accurate, and Dr. Graham would correct me on this specifically, that it'd be increasing your metabolic rate, but it would be increasing the amount of calories that your tissues require, like not, if that makes sense, But I do think that some form of strength training or really vigorously challenging ourselves habitually is important for overall health and wellness, physically, mentally, emotionally, irregardless of diet, So I think it is important, definitely. And as we age, it becomes even more important, I think. One, it helps with digestion, it helps with hormones, it helps with bone density. It's an avenue of exerting and really, what's it called? It's kind of like relieving stress, like just using energy. And then also, and this is a big thing, not just with strength training, but just movement and movement and exercise in general, is it creates the demand for more total food, which means we get more total nutrition. If we're not active at all, we actually can't be adequately nourished and we can't be optimally healthy because we're not getting enough of everything. We're designed to be fit. We're designed to move,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I can always feel when I do like some strength training, like really with weights, that I sleep so good. And I feel like my hormones and everything, it just kind of balances it out. So I always feel my best when I combine, like, yes, doing some biking and some walking and some yoga and running, but also doing some strength training here and there because, yeah, it just feels good. And recently I haven't really been doing any strength training because I'm like not at a gym right now, but I can feel myself craving so much to do it again because, yeah, it just feels so good.
That's exciting. That's exciting. When you have that experience, you notice the contrast and it becomes its own motivation. And I think the beautiful thing about fitness is everything can have its season and its reason. And, whether we're talking about like kind of the bouncing and running and cardio and stuff like that, I mean, that helps with the lymphatic drainage and just helps in so many different ways. And so does strength training, and so does agility training, and so does balance training. And, incorporating all of those into our lifestyle at one point or another, is a great way to, again, notice the benefits we get from it, which will then lead to being more likely to play and to do different things. And that'll make it also more likely that you'll maintain some form of activity over the long term, because that way it doesn't have to be just weights all the time. It's like, okay, I'm doing weights, that's fun. Well, now I feel like playing and dancing more than doing weights. I'm gonna do that. And oh, now I want to try like slacklining and really test my balance and stuff like that. And I think it's through exploring fitness and all the facets of fitness that we're much more likely to be fit and to do things more long term because it's varied.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And I feel like that kind of summarizes what I really learned from Doug Graham because I've spent some time with him at different festivals. And I used to look at fitness as something I would drag my body through to get to a certain goal. And now it's just fun. Like I so look forward to my workouts, or I don't even call them workouts anymore, but just moving my body. And yeah, I'm really grateful
Me too.
to him.
Me too. I gotta say, like the vast majority of the knowledge I've learned is from Doug in terms of all this kind of stuff, and I've learned from so many other people. But for me, he has provided a lot of clarity and simplicity, kind of common sense, physicality and nutrition. So it's like, yeah, a lot of the things I say is stuff that he's taught me and I've incorporated and I've had my own kind of voice with, right? But yeah, he's a huge mentor of mine and so many. In fact, I'd probably say most people on a fruit-based diet have heard of him or have been impacted by him or somebody who is impacted by him.
Yeah, because I feel like he makes things so clear, and he doesn't obscure stuff or says things that are kind of like don't make sense, but he's just straight to the point, and everything else he leaves out, and that way there's no room for confusion, which again, circling back to the topic, I feel like there are so many contradicting opinions.
Yeah.
It can sometimes be very easy to lose your focus and like where you really stand with your point of view. So
Absolutely. Yeah, clarity makes things a lot easier,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for sure. And there's another thing talking about clarity. So there are also people who say the fat you eat is the fat you wear, especially like the starch solution and everything. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you think it is helpful to completely cut overt fats out until you've reached your ideal body fat percentage?
Well, starting there, there's been periods of time where I've cut overt fats out just to feel more streamlined and to, check with my digestion. And if I'm really active, just to feel like I'm on rocket fuel, just really focusing on the fruit when I'm like super, super active. And that can feel great, especially when the fruit quality is amazing. But I myself tend to, and generally would say for others, that it's the best to do that when you just genuinely want to from a body state, and the food again is just amazing, and like you're eating and like I'm not attracted to the fats, as opposed to coming up with like a mental construct of, okay, I got to do this now because X, Y, and Z person said this, but you're looking at the fats going, oh, I want those, and like, nope, can't have them. So again, kind of coming back to a personalized approach with what you're really present with. As far as the fats you eat, the fats you wear, as I understand it, it is easier to gain weight from fats than from fruit for two different reasons. One being that excess calories from fruit are more likely to be urinated out, as opposed to fat being eaten is more likely to take slower, longer to digest, and not, it doesn't get urinated out. It's utilized by the body. And the other aspect of that too, and I mean, again, we kind of went back to like, yes, you can gain weight on fruit. So it's not like, it's a catch-all, and that's why people can't gain weight on fruit. You can. So it's not like if you eat excess, it's just going to always go out, but it can to some degree be urinated out. But the other aspect of it is the simple truth that fat is way more calorically dense. So it's way easier to get excess calories if you're including an abundance of fat or even a moderate amount of fat, right? So people don't often recognize that, like, an avocado is going to be like 3.5 bananas or more worth of calories in a small little bit. Or if they put oil in their salad, it's like, that same amount with a couple tablespoons, right? So it's, again, not necessarily 100% that it's like way easier. Like, it is a little bit easier to gain the weight on the fat, but it's just easier to get excess calories. And if you're getting excess calories, you're going to gain weight.
That makes sense, yeah. And would you say it's helpful to go without any overt fats for long periods of time? Do you think there's like any, because many people say it's bad for your hormonal health if you go
Yeah.
without overt fats for many people. What is your take on that?
Well, we definitely have a specific need for the essential fatty acids and for fats in general. They're very important for overall health. And I think there can be a bit of a caveat there. Like, I wouldn't recommend a no fat diet, completely no or overt fats, unless perhaps if somebody is, eating overtly fatty fruits, which I guess that kind of is on the edge, right? Like something like durian and stuff like that. Or otherwise, if they're in the tropics and they're eating top quality tropical fruit, which is naturally higher in EFAs anyway. So, like if someone's like I'm here in Sweden, if I was trying to eat locavore kind of stuff, mostly apples and pears and some cherries and stuff like that, it's going to be way lower in EFAs than somebody who's in the tropics eating an abundance of papayas and, ackee and, mangoes and even melons have a fair amount, so there's a little bit of a gradient there. But at the same time, I personally think that the addition of overt fats for the absolute most people, and really for basically everyone in the long term, is an important aspect of overall health. And I like to focus on the high omega-3 fats. There's even more and more evidence pointing towards having a proper omega-3 to 6 ratio is important for long-term brain health. So I like hemp as one of my main fat sources. Otherwise, chia and flax. And that doesn't mean that I don't eat any of the other stuff at all. It's just I make those my staple fats that are the largest amount that I would use. And then otherwise I include like walnuts, which are actually high omega-3 as well, but others like pumpkin seeds and sesame seeds and even some tahini and avocados and all those other ones. But it is just the last thing I'll say there too. It's important to note that fruits and veggies in general have EFAs in them, and they're generally speaking in the ratios we want for omega-3 to 6. So focusing in on an abundance of fruits and vegetables for the mainstay of your satiation and having the nuts and seeds as a extra, is to me a much more rational approach than being like, okay, well, fats are important, so I'm going to eat tons of fats and then reduce the fruit because that interacts poorly, right? So does that answer your question? So yeah, I wouldn't say long term to avoid it completely, but if you're eating tons of tropical fruit and you're in the tropics, you're going to be doing better off getting more EFAs, more fat than you would be if you're somewhere else eating temperate or lower quality fruits.
That makes so much sense. I've never heard that melons, for example, were higher in essential fatty acids. But I always find myself when I eat like a lot of melons and or mangoes and stuff, I'm craving less overt fats.
Mhm.
And I also love how you differentiate between the different overt fats because I can also notice such a difference when I eat. For example, I also found that hemp seeds digest so well, and I don't really feel like weird afterwards. But for example, when I have like coconut milk or something, even when it's homemade, I can feel like a little bit of like my system is a bit more clogged up, even when I'm still keeping it quite low. So I think it's very interesting how the different fats act differently and have a different effect on the body.
I found the same thing. For me, hemp is pretty much like one of the few fats that I almost feel better after eating. Like I don't feel like I get like a nut coma, like whereas yeah, something like cashew is a great example, or overdoing something like tahini or something like that. I feel a little bit kind of like bogged down and slowed down, so I do think that's important to focus in on those easier to digest fat sources that you feel really good after eating, and that have a better, more favorable omega-3 to 6 ratio. And I think we're going to find out more and more about that as time goes on.
Nice. Yeah, exciting times are ahead. Cool. And what are your thoughts on dried fruits? Because I found that it's very easy to overeat on them, but some people say you can just eat as many dates as you want, no problem, because it's carbohydrates. So what are your thoughts?
Well, there are different realities around dried fruits that aren't the same as with fresh fruits, So, of course, having no water content, they're going to be dehydrating in like to your body, right? So unless you're really hydrated and hydrating beforehand, or soaking them and then eating them soaked or blending them with water, they're going to be dehydrating for the body, right? And I mean, we want to stay hydrated. Every single cell in our body requires hydration for every process, right? So, and we also, if we're dehydrated, this kind of goes into like silly things like dry fasting and stuff like that. The body is not efficient at detoxifying, and it actually will not able to be detoxifying once you reach a certain rate of dehydration. So there's that. The other aspect, because they're dried, they stick to the teeth, and you're much more likely to develop tooth issues by eating a lot of dry fruit. In fact, the vast majority of people that I've known on a raw food diet through consulting or through talking to other people, who have been coaching other people or just at raw food festivals who've had tooth issues, it revolves around eating loads of dried fruit, so that's a really big one. Um, Also, yeah, I mean, again, we kind of talked about the calories in, calories out, and just dried fruit in general. It's really a dense calorie source, and it's really like it's kind of stimulating. It's like candy almost. So people are prone to overeat it, and just like candy and really hyper sweet things, people are more prone to eat it emotionally. So if we're emotionally eating dried fruit, we're much more likely not to be mindful and to way overdo calories. In my coaching, I've had certain people or various people, I'll say, who were eating a pretty well balanced raw food diet and consistently getting enough calories and doing pretty well. But then anytime they're stressed, they just eat 2 or 3 dates. And, that would lead to eating almost a pound of dates every single day, which is like another 1,500 calories, 1,400 calories. and they were gaining weight and they didn't know why. And we figured it out like, yeah, well, like everything looks good, but they weren't mentioning the dates until we really kind of went into like, well, I just like I'm snacking on dates because they're so tasty. It's like, yeah, well, you're getting way more calories and it's way harder on your teeth and it's harder on digestion since it's not water-rich food. So yeah, so I don't think that dry fruit in itself is bad and that we should never have it, but I wouldn't make it a mainstay of the diet. I'd be aware of our emotions and not try and use something like dried fruit as an emotional salve. I'd be much more mindful of my teeth if I did eat dried fruit. So when I eat dried fruit, more often than not, it's when I'm traveling, just for ease, like having a bag of dates and a bag of celery with me in the plane is really easy. Then I can put the dates in the celery and eat date celery sticks. I call them sweet C sticks, but there's date celery sticks. But like stuff like that can be great. And having some celery, having some lettuce, having some apple while you're eating dried fruit, so you do get some volume, you do get some water content, you get more mineralization, and you finish the dried fruit eating something fresh like those things. So it helps kind of brush your teeth to some degree. I think is a better way to be eating dried fruit or blending it. I mean, I make date smoothies a fair amount, but that's going to be very, very different than, again, just eating them dry as is, which I wouldn't recommend as a staple.
Because you're still getting in some water, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you're blending it with the water, you're getting more volume. It's going to be easier to digest. It doesn't have the realities of getting stuck to your teeth or anything like that. So yeah, I find date smoothies a really nice a nice meal, but I prefer other fruits. For me, it's a backup. Like I almost always have some dried fruit like dates on hand, but it's more so using in recipes or utilizing as a backup when I don't have any fresh fruit that's ripe and available.
Nice. Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I can always feel my teeth are getting a little bit more yellowish when I eat quite a bit of dried fruit. And also just generally, I feel my very best when I focus on the high. And yeah, so I think that's really, really interesting. And I also think that bananas are really, really cool because they have a high water content and they're kind of similar like dates, like available all year round and such a great staple. That's why I really love making banana smoothies.
Me too. And they're so satiating. I mean, that's the benefit of things like bananas and dried fruit is that they're higher caloric density. And while we were talking about weight loss, one of the main reasons people have a hard time on the diet, especially in the beginning, is not getting enough calories. So understanding caloric density and getting in some of those sweet fruits. Most people do best having one sweet fruit meal a day. Whether that's bananas, dates, mamey, jackfruit, mangoes, whatever it may be, but having those on the menu with some consistency can bring more satiety and make it easier just to maintain or gain muscle if you want. Because a lot of people want to lose weight, other people want to gain weight, right? And knowing how to get in more calories in a way that doesn't burst your stomach and digests well, and you're not like way overdoing fat, it's beneficial as well.
Nice. Do you think it's possible to overeat on bananas?
It's possible to overeat on anything. Again, the simplest truths are the most profound and often the ones people don't follow. But it's like, if you're enjoying it, great. When you stop enjoying it and you start to look at it like gross, I don't like that. Yeah, you're probably overdoing it, and whether that is in terms of calories or whether that's just in terms of your body's ability to uptake the sugars, you're already topped off, your glycogen stores are full, that might be the other reality of it. One thing we can do to kind of bring balance in there, if let's say we're having a hard time getting enough calories and we're eating bananas and we're like, I ate two and then I'm sick of them, is eat them with greens because that slows down the absorption, brings more of a savory mineral balance. And we may find if we're like, well, this makes sense, but when I try and follow that, I still can't get anywhere near enough calories, right? Well, yeah, again, eat them with greens. So you have the celery or you have lettuce beside you, you're having bananas and you start to be like, oh, that's too much sweet, have a couple bites of the greens and then look back at it. And if you're enjoying it more again, have a bit more and go back and forth until you feel like, okay, I'm done. For me, that measure is basically like, I'm done. Like, push away. I genuinely don't want any more. I'm not forced it. I'm not so stuffed I feel sick, but I'm like, I'm good. And to me, that's one of the greatest things about this lifestyle. I don't know any other diet where you can literally eat until you're totally satiated at every meal, as you'd think we're designed to do. To me, it just doesn't make sense. it's almost a signpost for a not a poor, uh, a non-natural or non-optimal diet to be like, before you're totally happy and satisfied, you have to stop. Like you got to stop it halfway because that's just the way it is. You know, you're created in such a way that you never should be satisfied. It's like, are you kidding me? That just doesn't make any sense. It just really spells out a poor dietary approach, or at least a dietary approach that doesn't really match our physiology, our anatomy, and what we've been designed for.
Yeah, I've never looked at it from that perspective, but that's so true. Like even with like a high carbohydrate cooked food diet, I feel like in order to keep the amount that I'm eating balanced, I need to stop before I'm actually like satiated, especially like full in terms of the volume in my stomach. So yeah, there is really no other diet where it's just so easy to always hit the perfect amount just by listening to your body. So it's yeah, such a wonderful discovery.
It
And
makes sense though, right? Because cooked foods, they take longer to digest. You know, the body isn't assimilating them and you're not actually getting the calories from them like quickly, you know, and the fruits and the veg and stuff like that. I mean, fruit comes virtually pre-digested, so we get a different feeling of satiety and quicker feedback from our body when we've actually had enough. So we're just way more prone to overeat when we're talking about concentrated fats or cooked foods. And even that still said, with low fat cooked carbohydrates, it's again fairly hard to overdo, like, but it's way easier than with fruit comparatively.
yeah, I agree because it's also quite stimulating, so it's harder to tell when you've had enough. Whereas this with fruit, it makes you feel so good and every bite tastes amazing, but when you've had enough, and then there's nowhere else to
I
have.
will put one caveat on there though, because if we're talking about, you know, like what is a good measure of the perfect food for us, it's like a food that we can eat in its pure natural state without any processing, any seasonings, anything on it, and experience good digestion and be able to eat till total satisfaction and, you know, optimally be able to get enough calories, you know? So when we're talking about fruit, that fits all of that perfectly. It's pretty much our perfect food, but that doesn't mean it's the only food we should eat, but it's pretty much our perfect food. And then if we're talking about cooked carbohydrates, well, if we season them and we put sauces on them and we do a whole bunch of stuff, we add some fat to them. Well, yeah, it's way easier to be stimulated and to overdo it because it's like exciting our taste buds and it's higher in caloric density, you know, especially again if we're putting fats or oils or anything like that on it. But if we just have plain potato and you have a meal of plain potato, you're going to be much less likely to overeat it. You know, most people don't just sit down to a meal of plain potato, you know, they put stuff on it, right? So I just wanted to put that distinction there because the cooked carbohydrate, it can be harder to overeat than almost anything else besides fruit if we're not like heavily seasoning it and saucing it and adding a whole bunch of stuff to it. But again, most people aren't going to do that because it's just, it doesn't digest as good and it's not as tasty as fruit. Why would we do that? I'd rather do fruit myself.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes do like if I eat cooked food, then I do add like lettuce to it or like a low sodium, low fat sauce. But I definitely find that when I focus on the fruit, that's like the very best. And I'm sure you've had that moment in your life as well where you were standing like between the choice, okay, do I want to go all in with the raw vegan diet or do I want to stay high raw? So what made you make that decision of like going all in and how,
You know,
yeah, that
it really, you know, for those, there were 6 months where I was high raw and I was feeling great. And I mean, it's long enough ago now that I don't remember all my thoughts around it, to be honest. Like I was feeling good, but at the same time, I was interested in being all raw, but it wasn't a career choice. It wasn't something, you know, that I thought like I had to do. I just was feeling better and better the more fruits and veg I added that were raw. And I wanted to go in that direction. But when I met Dr. Graham, he was literally glowing. I've said it before. He had like a field around him, and I'd never seen that not having ingested something like magic mushrooms. He was literally glowing. I was like, this dude has something going on. And I talked with him, and you know, the next day I went all raw, and I had like a one of those kind of satori powerful opening moments where I was just like, this is why I'm here on the planet. And I'm not saying it was because of the raw food, but I met my purpose. I was like, I'd been studying nutrition for 5 years up until then, and I just did it for skateboarding. But when I applied that and I gained that clarity, literally the next day I was like, I want to do this and teach this and spread this information, and my whole paradigm shifted. Um, so just at that point, it was like, okay, all raw. That's what I want to do. That's what's feeling great. And I had some ups and downs with that, and I had some doubts and stuff like that over some time, some challenges. But it was very clear to me, and I just continually wanted to grow in ways to make that more streamlined, more accessible, and easier for people to understand. And that took me like 4.5 years to get to the point where I was like, okay, I'm starting the Raw Advantage and doing this as a full-time profession. I just want to say, excuse me, I unfortunately have another live in 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't have to do anything between, so we can go the next seven. But if there's any other questions that we haven't hit or anything really specific, then just to optimize time, just to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for saying that. I would like to also go a little bit into your book, if you want to.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So, yeah, how did that idea came about? Do you want to share a little bit?
Well, this is one of those things that maybe I shouldn't share, but I'm going to because that's just how I try and operate. Life has been very busy and has been challenging, and behind the scenes, a lot of computer work and a lot of website stuff and personal stuff. And the bundle got closer and closer, and I say percolate instead of procrastinated. And I had a couple different ideas, and I truthfully had a bit of a bigger idea, but I was like, I almost contemplated not making something for the bundle. And then I was like, no, I really want to. Like, I'd feel really bad if I didn't. And the choice that just felt like, you know what, this is something that I've been thinking about for a really long period of time that has really been waiting to come out is the banana book. So it was my second choice, I'll be honest. But I chose it, and I'm really, really happy I did because it dispels a lot of myths around bananas. It dispels fact from fiction, goes into the history, the ecology, and it was a really great way for me to, tell my story of being the banana commander and share all my favorite banana recipes. So it was, yeah, it was something I didn't think I was going to make this year, but it just came to be that, that made the most sense to do. And my mind was able to wrap around it with everything going on in the world and put it out into the world.
Thank you for sharing. I love the book. Even just looking at it, I already felt so much more like I want to eat more bananas. And I think it's a great book, and especially the recipes in there. Like, they are so versatile. I didn't even know you could do so many things with bananas, and yet they're so simple. So I just wanted to say that I really like the book, and I'm excited to try the recipes.
I hope you love them. It's funny. Over a year ago, I started messing around with banana curries and stuff like that, and I kept them under the wraps because I planned on making a banana book at some time, and I've had a little bit of a habit of that, which has kind of bit me in the butt a little bit. Like coming up with something and then just like, nope, I'm not going to share that, not going to share that, and then luckily this one I put out, and it worked out really, really good, and I'm really happy with it. And it's fun to have both really sweet and savory recipes that use bananas, because oftentimes people think of bananas as like a lunch meal, but it can be an amazing dinner meal. And I don't often just want a banana smoothie for dinner. I'll do that sometimes, but actually having a nice savory banana recipe at night can be really nice.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm still often making like your curry with the plantains. Curry, it's a Jamaican stew with the plantains. It's so nice, and I would have never thought of the idea, but it's so great. And bananas are available everywhere and year round, and so satiating. So I think it's
inexpensive too, right? Yeah. They're inexpensive. It's so nice. It's so nice, and yeah, they're just easy. That's the thing I love about bananas is, like, to me they are the rice and potatoes or rice and beans of a raw food diet. It's like, I don't know, it's an easy one to be satiated with and to get, like you said, year round, and they don't break the bank. So, and they're dang tasty. They're, to me, they're like, this is a really horrible reference, but they're like Mario. If you play like Mario Brothers, they have different characters and each of them have different strengths, but Mario is just like good at kind of everything. He's not excelling in absolutely anything necessarily, but he's just great. It's like Ryu in Street Fighter.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Video game references. Sorry about that.
This is okay. So if anyone wants to get the Amazing Banana Book, and I also have 2 courses in the bundle, probably already heard of it. You can get it for $50 inside Chris's bio or inside my bio. There's a link. and also a great way to support us. So yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a ridiculous deal. We got like less than a day and a quarter, I think, left, or a day and a half-ish left, and then it's gone forever.
It's
only happens once a year.
Only one more day, right? That
Yeah,
you
tomorrow's the last day.
It's gone forever. So definitely, if you want to get it, and if you've been thinking about it, then definitely now is the time to do it, because yeah, then after that we won't be able to offer that deal anymore.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. Well, and I always enjoy the lives with you so much, and you bring so much clarity and so much joy into this whole lifestyle. So thank you so much for coming on, Chris. And
such a pleasure.
At the life.
Super sweet to connect always. Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, for the fun questions. I hope that it brings extra clarity to a bunch of people.
Yeah, for sure. All right, then thanks everyone for tuning in.
Bye. Thank you.